I'm Janine from Teach the Future.
And I'm Zanne also from Teach the Future South Africa.
So today we're going to talk about Sustainable Development Goals, specifically those pertaining to education and what it's about and exactly the impact that our initiatives in South Africa have on education. So Zanne, what is the Sustainable Development Goals got to do with education? And I know that the number 4 goal refers to education in South Africa. So how are we doing? What does it mean?
So just to take one step back, what does SDG 4 say? In short, the headline is ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. So it's very broad. And actually, if you break it down, there are a number of sub-goals that countries and regions should actually be measuring themselves against. I'm just going to quickly run through those sub-goals because I think if you understand the sub-goals, you actually know what you need to achieve. So the number 1, 4.1 is free primary and secondary education. And then it branches out into tertiary education, vocational training.
Free?
Well, actually, it's equitable access and affordable. So
not quite free.
Not quite free. Okay. It also talks about early childhood development, a lot of ECD stuff. It then also looks at the workspace because if we say lifelong learning, it also extends into the workspace. And then overall, eliminating all discrimination, really important. And foundational universal literacy and numeracy. And then there's also a sub-goal looking at teachers specifically and qualified teachers. So it's actually a really broad SDG with lots of detail underneath.
So how are we doing? Do we have any good stories, success stories that we can share? Because it's a lot of work. It's very broad.
It is. So South Africa recently, 2019, formed part of what they call a voluntary review. And they have a beautiful report out to tell everyone exactly how South Africa is doing on these SDGs. And there's some good news things.
Good.
I mean, the reality in South Africa is most children in South Africa complete primary school. So in terms of SDG 4.1, yes, they do get primary school education. Things start changing, towards high school. However, if you compare 2002 to 2019, we've seen an increase from 22% to 31% of learners actually completing secondary education. So that's a significant increase. Maybe not ideal, but we have to celebrate these small wins because that will keep us motivated. And then we also see improvements in standardized testing. Again, maybe benchmark against the world, not where we want to be, but definitely improvements.
But we also have some bad news though.
Yes.
And if I can maybe just touch on that because it's something that's a real concern for us in South Africa. Some of them call it a broken and unequal education system. It's quite a negative way to look at it, and I think we can probably frame it a bit differently. But if we look at some of the stats in the Amnesty International report that was published in February of this year, 2020, they found, and I found this quite alarming, that only 19% of public schools only had illegal pit latrines available for children. That is just, 37 schools had no sanitation facilities. 77% had no library. Reading and writing are such basic skills. Internet access, 72% had none. And 239 schools had no electricity. So those are quite alarming. However, with the bad news, unfortunately, I think we had people like Google who installed Google Station recently, so several township areas now have free Wi-Fi. Without Wi-Fi, children have no access to the rest of the world. But the other really important thing for me is that almost over 50% of our youth, and those are 15 to 24-year-olds, are not in training, they're not in college or university, they don't have jobs. So we have about 3.5 million youngsters who have nothing to do every day. That's what is referred to sometimes as a youthquake, a potential disaster waiting to happen in our country. So we need to get these youngsters gainfully employed or in training. We are so far behind in terms of skills development and training for the fourth industrial revolution that we really have to rethink and think about what we're going to do to keep them busy. What can we do about that?
I'm going to get to that now. Can I just add on?
Yeah.
In terms of that Amnesty International report, what was for me quite telling when I talk about unequal education is that if you take all the distinctions of the kids in the top 200 schools, they have more distinctions in matric than the next 6,600 schools combined. So unfortunately, and this is quoting the Amnesty International report, education in South Africa very much still depends on where they are born, how wealthy they are, and the colour of their skin.
And the other thing to add to that, which is such a basic thing, it also depends which gender you are. Because we also know that girls in South Africa and Africa have a distinct disadvantage. I mean, up to 30% of their school attendance they miss because of menstruation. They have no access to sanitation and to sanitary wear to assist them in a basic bodily function over which they have no control. So that puts our girls at an even more disadvantage than the boys. So, guys, we kind of need to get the basics right. We need to be able to enable our children to access education just as a start. So, okay, so what else can we do?
Asking about the,
yes, what
can
we
we
do?
So the best thing for me is always looking at examples of things that are working.
Yes.
And the most recent great example that I came across is the Jacques Gerwel Technical School in Bonnievale. And for me, that is an exemplar of where business, the local business, the community, and the education system came together, and they built this technical high school because they believe in the future of Bonnievale. And I think as we know that the resources on the government side is thinly spread, we will not make a dent in all these SDG goals if we are not looking at more closer partnerships between government, between businesses, and between communities. So for me, that is really the crux of the matter.
But this is the same school where they identify the skills needed in the local businesses, then train the children in those skills, and that they basically have guaranteed employment when they finish, correct?
And they also, so what's so exciting about it is that now they're extending the services where they actually have recruitment facilities in Bonnievale because they want to connect the people that need people to come and work for them with these kids that are coming out of the vocational technical training.
So maybe we can also just say, we mentioned that we're from Teach the Future and how Teach the Future aids in the whole education sphere in South Africa. So Teach the Future South Africa is based on a global curriculum that's been developed by Professor Peter Bishop in the US. And that's based on about 30 or 40 years worth of teaching experience in futures in the US. And what Teach the Future does and aims to do is to try and change the mindset of the young people in South Africa and to think about the future, to ensure that they get their agency back, that they understand that they have the ability to influence their own futures. They can decide and they can influence how that turns out. But they also taught to tools, technology, methodologies, etc., to decide how do I want this to unfold. So given various things that happen in life and being unpredictable, they can navigate through these changes. They are taught to see changes, to identify trends. We call them dots on the horizon, what might happen. And you know what? If this happened, that's fine. Let's develop an alternative future. So we try and give them the tools to distinguish between alternative futures and what do I do to make one of them more of a reality.
And we firmly believe, you and I, but I think we share this with a lot of people, is that if we can improve the future of the youth population, we are actually improving the future of South Africa.
Absolutely.
Those two are inextricably linked to each other. Just to bring it all back to the SDGs, because as I said initially, there are so many SDGs, and no one can address all of them.
And also all act in isolation. I mean, they all fit each other.
Exactly. So if we have to link our activities to the sub-goals of the SDGs, I would say that because we are enabling these kids to navigate uncertainty and look at how they can influence their own future. One of the outcomes that links back to the SDGs is if they can see opportunities in terms of entrepreneurship,
social entrepreneurship,
they can also then, when they have to decide what they want to do after school, they are more open-minded in terms of what the opportunities are. And then also in terms of there's a sub-target 4.7 which talks about sustainable development and global citizens. Because we share the interconnectedness of everything and the complexity, we open their eyes to that global citizenship.
Yes.
So we make a contribution to that. And lastly, we also train teachers who want to incorporate futures thinking into their daily classroom.
So all in all, basically, spending effort on the education goal of the sustainability goals is basically spending time and effort on the future of the country.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Future of the Sustainable Development Goals. Please click on the logo below to subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for more great content. Don't miss the next episode.